Engineering geology lost a great contributor to the foundation of our science this year, Dr. Don U Deere. Midwest Geosciences Group pays tribute to Dr. Deere. We've kindly asked his son, Don W. Deere, to share some moments of his dad's life and legacy. Thank you, Don, for taking the time to assemble a special tribute.
Dan, thank you for asking me to present this tribute as an introduction for your webinar on rock core logging for hydrogeologic projects. The outreach to my sister and I has truly been amazing from his former students and colleagues. They all tell me about the influence that he had on their careers. As shown on the first slide, I call him the consummate engineering geologist because although he had a bachelor's in mining engineering and a PhD in civil engineering, he always called himself first and foremost an engineering geologist. He got his master's in geology at the University of Colorado, and it was events there that really changed his whole career. He was doing a master's thesis on the engineering geology of the University of Colorado campus in the mid-1940s. And the university was doing a lot of building at the time, including construction of a very huge student union. And they hired Dr. Ralph Peck from the University of Illinois as a consultant to CU on the foundation construction, because there were some tricky foundations there with the expansive clays, which was a whole new field at the time. So the first thing they had Dr. Peck do was meet with this graduate student to find out about the geology of the campus. It was that meeting that really changed his career, because Dr. Peck called his colleague, Dr. Carl Terzargi at Harvard, and told him, hey, I've found a young student here at Colorado that I think we need to bring into our fold. And it was that association that really formed his career. It was Dr. Terzargi that eventually convinced my dad to go to the University of Illinois and get his PhD under Dr. Peck. In fact, in a few years later, Dr. Terzargi and my father started a book entitled Engineering Geology. Unfortunately, they only got through the first 2 chapters before Dr. Terzargi fired my dad because he simply couldn't meet the deadlines because he was so busy as a professor at the University of Illinois, as well as working on many consulting projects that were brought in by Dr. Terzargi's and Peck. Moving on to the second slide, my father was always a teacher, and if you had to learn one thing from him, and he said if there was just one thing we could teach engineering geologists to have the best engineering geologists, it would be you need to look for that singular geologic feature at a site that really will control the behavior of the rock mass. These features are typically only an inch or 2 wide. They can extend a great distance, but very narrow features that will really control the permeability, the deformability, and the shear strength of a rock mass. These kind of features I'm talking about are like master joints, as shown on the photo, faults, bedding plane shears, foliation shears. His lesson to geologists is that you need to find that feature. They almost always exist on every site you work on. You need to understand the geologic regime you're working in, because that will tell you what to look for. For example, Here's a photo of a open master joint that occurred in a steep down-cut canyon where they were looking at constructing a dam site. This will obviously control the hydrogeology and seepage. In this case, through an open joint like that, it'd be much more than seepage. It'd be gushing flow. These are typical in steep valleys caused by rapid down cutting, and you have stress relief that opens towards the valley. So what he would teach you is you're also there's going to be an associated horizontal feature, a bedding plane shear that the whole massive rock block moved into the valley on. Another thing that he would always say to me is you need to take as many groundwater and hydrogeology courses as you can because water is almost always the issue and the problem on any type of heavy construction site. And fortunately, I did listen to his advice, and that groundwater is such an important element in the work we do. The next slide shows the basic how you log RQD. My father developed RQD in the late 1960s as a way of showing the percentage of good rock in borehole core. He was working on a project for the U.S. military where they were trying to site a large underground cavern, and they were comparing one site to the other, and some generals had to make the decision of which site they were going to. The consensus prior to his presentation was to go to site number 2, which was highly fractured rock and he thought would be very problematic. So that evening in his hotel room, he invented RQD to try to convince the generals that site 1 was much better than site 2, and here he would show them the calculations where site 1 had an RQD of 90 and site 2 had an RQD of 30, that obviously they had to construct it at site 1, which they did. Gin grouting was another thing he conceived of, and this was part of foundation grouting for large dams, doing a grout cutoff. My father worked on over 40 large dam and reservoir projects, primarily related to hydroelectric generation in South America. This work was done in the 1970s and 80s, and he was working closely with a excellent Swiss engineer, Dr. Giovanni Lombardi, and it was the two of them that conceived and put together the GIN grouting method. GIN stands for grout intensity number, where you use a stable mix, a thick, stable mix where the cement stays in suspension. Your grout intensity number is a function of the product of your pressure versus the volume of grout take, and that it was okay to grout at high pressures if you had limited volumes. So that's a method that's now used throughout the world for both dams and tunnels. In closing, I'd like to say, not only did my dad give me these technical lessons, but he gave me lessons to use in life, and those are basically, they come from, you know, his heritage as a farm boy in western Iowa. He would always say, you can take the boy out of the farm, but you can't take the farm out of the boy. And you know, what he taught me was basically honesty, integrity, be enthusiastic about anything you take on, and do it with a sense of humor. On that note, Dan, I want to thank Midwest Geosciences Group for asking me to give this introduction, and I hope you found that interesting. Thank you.
Definitely. Don, thank you for sharing these great stories. And there is no doubt that your personalization and your professionalism is part of your dad's legacy. Your dad gave great advice. It's our privilege to dedicate our rock core logging course to your dad. Thank you again, and blessings to you and the entire Deere family.